And when I heard the Led Zeppelin, that was it. I was just, Jimmy Page became, the object of my adoration.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to play the guitar, but I didn't really have the courage. When I might assume that I was suffering from low self-esteem because I didn't feel worthy of picking up a guitar and playing it. Isn't that silly?
You're listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a T. Torrance Productions original podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Kurt Newman, and we are staring at the world today with Mr. Steve Vai, who most of you probably know just by his name. He's a guitar virtuoso. He's also a singer, songwriter, composer, producer, just really incredible guy. And I had a great interview with him, so here we are. Hey everybody, it's Kurt Newman, and we are staring at the world today with Mr. Steve Vai. Most people know him just by that name, but if you don't, let me read a few things about him here and inform you just who he is. He's an American guitarist, composer, singer, songwriter, and producer. Sold over 15 million records worldwide. He is 15-time Grammy nominee. 3 times he walked out the door holding that statue. He's been voted 10th greatest guitarist in the world by Guitar World magazine. And probably my most favorite thing I read about you, Steve, was I believe the editor of that magazine said, Steve Vai's guitar wizardry is so profound that in earlier times, he would have been burned as a witch.
Now, I thought you were going to say that one of your favorite things was that you discovered I'm a beekeeper.
Yes, I did discover that as well, and a vegetarian, which is both wonderful things. But I felt like that kind of did describe your guitar wizardry. I'm fascinated by what you're able to do with that instrument. And because I do play guitar as well, and a very different style, I'm just in awe of what you do on that guitar and the sounds you make and where you've taken it. It's like I see it as a craftsmanship, and you've just taken it to such an incredible place.
Well, thank you, Kurt. It's always encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it's just amazing stuff that you do. And one thing I'd love to do with you, because I know about you playing the guitar, and I've watched you play guitar for so long, but I didn't know much about you as a person. So with a lot of guests, I kind of like to go back to where they all started from, like your childhood and who your parents were and what they did, what it was like in your household growing up. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I lived a charmed life. My childhood, I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I had great parents, Italian Long Island family, and it had its challenges. My father was a liquor salesman and a bartender, so it was very easy to drift off into alcoholism.
Yeah.
So for a particular period of my life, it was a challenge. It was difficult, but I was fortunate because when I was 12, my father just quit, and I learned forgiveness, and also I got to know who he really was, and I had many years of knowing the really cool guy. But he was very proud of all of his children. He had 5, and I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm 4th in line, and I am blessed with the greatest siblings. We're a very tight, loving, supportive family, always have been. Yeah. My brothers have been my mentors, and just incredible support and love. And, there was challenges, of course, growing up. But in my musical world, I think I lit up first when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I walked up to a little organ in my aunt's house that you weren't supposed to touch.
Yeah.
And I hit a note, and I noticed that to the right they go higher and to the left they go lower. And it was that instant that when I reflect on it now, I think that was when music opened up. It just became practical. The construction of music became very clear to me. I was like, oh, you mean these little black dots? Oh, and then it dawned on me that, you can create music by writing it, and then people play it. That's
Yeah.
how it. And that was an epiphany beyond. I mean, I was only a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, so it was quite a, I guess, revelation, So that started the attraction for me to music, and I didn't know anything,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, all people that are musicians usually have that moment, but then my parents came home with West Side Story, which we were influenced by the music that comes into our house when we're little kids,
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
and that lit me up. I mean, I was maybe 8 years old, 9 years old, but it had drama, it had theater, all because I'm a ham. I I love theater. I want to be a great performer
Yeah.
and a player and all these things. And when I was watching West Side Story, the melody, the orchestration, the bigness of it, and I knew it was composed. And I said, "That's what I want. I want to write music." So I just started doodling notes. That was my doodle. I didn't
Wow.
know what I was doing. And then when I was like 9 or so, I started playing the accordion, like all
Nice.
good Long
Yeah.
Island
Yeah.
Italian
Yeah. I
boys.
love the accordion.
Yeah, it was great. The way the bellows smelled was
All
fantastic.
of it. I have a Italian player who plays with me in my band who plays accordion. He's from around
Yeah,
Milan, and he went over there and got one handcrafted for him, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful instrument. It's just, and they
yeah. I
sound
mean, you can.
incredible.
Yeah, they're kind of like art projects for some people.
They really are. You got to
They're
be careful
fantastic. Yeah,
not to get it too hot, or the glue will melt. So you got to be
yeah.
careful with them. But incredible
Well,
instruments.
I wasn't a big fan of the accordion, but I could get music out of it. And
Yeah.
when I played "Smoke on the Water" on the accordion, I thought I arrived. It was either that or "Arrivederci Roma."
Yeah.
But then my sister um, was listening to Led Zeppelin,
Mm.
and when I was about 10, I started listening through her door, and that's when the real awakening for me happened, because she was listening to like all of this great 70s rock music,
Yeah.
Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. And when I heard the Led Zeppelin, that was it. I was just, Jimmy Page became, the object of my adoration.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to play the guitar, but I didn't really have the courage. When I might assume that I was suffering from low self-esteem because I didn't feel worthy of picking up a guitar and playing it. Isn't that
Wow.
silly? I
Yeah.
thought, well, that's beyond my. The fantasy is fine, but not really. I mean, I'm not cool enough, and
Well,
whatever, you know. And let me back up just a little bit.
sure.
Before that, the first thing that lit me up about the guitar, I was about 7 years old. I walked into a auditorium in my grade school there, and there was a kid on the stage. He must have been 9 or something, and he was playing the guitar.
Yeah.
And the moment I saw that, everything froze. It was one of those moments of clarity. It was beautiful, the way it looked, the way it sounded. I could remember every detail about that moment, the way the room smelled, the color of the seats, what the kid was wearing. It was like, and that's when I fell in love with the instrument. I said, "Yep, it's calling. That's it." But I didn't have the courage until I
Yeah.
heard Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, but
The
like
push.
listening to Led Zeppelin, you kind of feel like, how could I do that, right?
How could I do that? But I have to play this thing. I
Yeah.
want to play it. So a friend of mine had a guitar that he sold me for $5, Rich Jankowski, and
Nice.
I couldn't believe I owned this. It was an old Tesco Del Rey,
Oh,
and
nice.
uh, I couldn't play it. I was in a band, but I was playing keyboards because I knew how to play Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Well, there you
you know,
go.
but I secretly started taking lessons, and I think what I call the Vai advantage is that my guitar teacher from day one was Joe Satriani.
Oh, there you
You
go.
know, yeah.
Yeah, I had
How
heard
do you beat
about
that?
that, and it's just like, were you guys like neighbors or something from the same town? Were you close enough?
Yeah, I would walk to his house for lessons. It was about 15-minute walk. He was across my town, but my
Was
town
he
was this big.
Was he much older than you, or were you guys similar ages, or
Joe's
how?
4 years older than me.
Yeah.
So we went to
Well,
the
that's
same
cool.
school,
Yeah.
and he was one of the big kids, and he played. And Joe was just always cool. And his ability to see what was happening at the time also, because I was so interested in composition and music, I enrolled in this music theory class in high school that was for 12th graders when I was in seventh grade.
Yeah.
And for my entire years through high school, I learned everything about composition that you could know, that, or at least I could absorb. But interestingly enough, I wasn't applying it to the guitar. I'd pick up the guitar and I'd be playing, my Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin songs. But Joe had the same teacher, Bill Westcott. So Joe was learning all that stuff, but he knew how to apply it to the guitar,
Yeah.
So I would go to him and he'd say, well, the modes, this is how they work, and I go, whoa, So the lessons with Joe for like 3 years became the most important thing in my world. And so this is the evolution of my musical youth, so to speak. And I was in rock bands, and that was the best. There's nothing cooler than being in a rock band in high
Yeah.
school.
That's for
And
sure.
they were tough guys too. So it was really
And that
great.
time, that era, I mean, music had so much character and appreciation, and when you're in a band, it was looked at as something really special,
Yeah,
And I know exactly what you're speaking about
yeah.
when you talk about that. I was in high school bands as well, and my first click with music, though, was as a drummer. I had a chance to get out of school for an hour if I took some kind of musical lesson. And so,
Ah,
because I was so terrible at the regular math and science and
curriculum. Yeah.
all of that stuff, I was just happy to get out. And so I chose drums, and that clicked with me in a very similar way. And all throughout high school, I did the same thing. Any kind of music class I could take that would get me away from a science or reading or
Yeah. That was like
algebra
the
or
escape.
something.
Yeah,
I
what
would
a
do
great
it.
escape plan,
It was. I would find myself in the band room just hanging out, playing
Yeah.
whatever, because somehow it got me out of these other things I didn't relate to at all. And so,
How did things evolve for you after high school?
well, I didn't have any choice as far as going to a college or something. So for me, it was get a job. And what I did is I took what cash I had after graduating and I bought a guitar because I wanted to learn how to write songs. And so my
Nice.
career move out of high school was expand, not from just being a drummer, but learn how to write songs. Because if you're going to go anywhere in music, you got to learn to write songs. So
Yeah. When did you start the BoDeans?
it was around 1983.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I had gotten out of high school at 79. And so I had no choice but to do anything. So like you, I imagine, I had been up in my room as a kid, and I started multi-tracking by bouncing cassette decks back and forth to each other.
That
And
old trick, yeah.
yeah, and doing songs like that and playing whatever instrument I could get my hands on. And eventually I talked a friend of mine to quit college and come back and start playing music with me. And so we did that. But
And then
yeah,
it evolved from there.
yeah, people responded to it, and we got lucky, and things happened. But
That was
as
good
a
songs.
guitar player, though, I've never considered myself a guitar player as much as a singer-songwriter.
Hmm.
So I play whatever I have to in songs to, if there's a lead section, I try to make something happen with it. But I've
Yeah.
never been the type of person who does what you and Joe Satriani and people like that can do with that instrument, which is,
Well, your main attraction was to songwriting,
yeah,
it
yeah,
seems, and
it was.
that's cool. I try to one of the things I talk about in interviews is with young guitar players is you need to focus on the amount of technique that's necessary for you to express what it is you want to express.
Right.
And for some people, they don't need a lot of technique. Bob Dylan
Yeah.
doesn't need a lot of guitar. He needs some technique.
Yeah.
But then there's people that are interested, like myself, so to speak, in focusing on the instrument. I always wanted the technique. I wanted to. It was just a private desire. I want to be able to rip it up and so the
Yeah.
practicing, the hours and hours and hours involved in getting there were never really a chore. They
Yeah.
didn't really require discipline. It required joy, and that's it.
I have a bit of a theory too about if you start a musical instrument at those right ages, like you said, somewhere between 6 or 9 and
Hmm.
15, that something sets into the brain almost in a way that doesn't happen after that. At least for me, it seemed that way. The way music came to me at those early ages and how quickly drumming came to me at those early ages compared to buying the guitar and trying to learn another instrument on top of that,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
came much slower. And so I wonder for
yeah.
you if you think any of that early times of working with Joe and taking those lessons and stuff and him explaining the theory of it really helped you jumpstart into, taking the instrument to another place.
Oh, they were vital. It was a vital foundation. I was really given the keys to the kingdom by taking those lessons with Joe.
And the
But
practice.
I had to do something with them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But the thing is I really loved practicing, you know.
Right.
I just liked it, and it's not necessary if it's not what you want. If it's what you want, you just organically find yourself doing it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
expanding, I suppose.
Yeah, but Joe, the big takeaway from him, he shared everything. He shared everything he knew. He was tough too. But the takeaway, there was something about Joe outside of just playing the guitar that we all knew, that the universe that surrounded him in the school and everything, and he was just an independent thinker.
Yeah.
He never made excuses, and he did what was interesting to him, and this had a big impact on me, and that was further um, that was furthered when I was working with Zappa,
Right.
because Frank Zappa is the freest thinker I ever met, and also he was he was constantly creative, and he just did it. He would just do it,
Right.
you know, and that's I was like 20 when I joined his band, and I was on him like every move,
Yeah.
how do and that was I've had so much incredible education,
Yeah.
you know.
I feel like I hear that when I listen to your first record too,
Oh my God, yeah, that's
of
very
just
Zappa.
that. Yeah, but it's just also not afraid to just do this and do this and do
Yeah,
this. I didn't, I hear that kind of disregard for limitations and just, I'm going to do this because I want to.
yeah,
And one of the things I found really fascinating that I read about you was not just playing and being the transcriptionist for Zappa, which is incredible too, um, but was after that when you moved to LA that you had started your own label to release that for your
yeah,
early music, and that was something
yeah,
that maybe people were doing it, but I certainly didn't know of being able to do that on a national level
yeah.
at that time. But if you can talk about this, the label was called, if I'm not mistaken, Akashic Records. Is that how
Akashic Records.
Akashic?
Yeah, it changed because I discovered that the name was taken, and I had to change it.
Well,
So I changed it to Your Rancher Records, but then that was taken, so I had to change it again.
but can I read this and you tell me if this has anything to do with the title of the label? I mean,
Okay.
does it have anything to do with the Akashic Records that I know
Oh
of?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me just read this for the people who don't know about it because it's interesting. A compendium of all universal events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future in terms of all entities and life forms, not just human, existing on a non physical plane of existence known as the mental plane. Is that was that
Yeah.
part of why you chose it? Just like that's what you were feeling or thinking?
Well, yes. Well, at the time, I was 20 years old, and really heavily into metaphysics. I
That's what
was
I was wondering.
fascinated. Yeah, very heavily. It kicked off when I was about 20, and I lived right down the street from this wonderful bookstore called the Bodhi Tree, and they had everything in there every kind of spiritual, religious, occult, from flying saucers to self-enlightenment and
Eastern religion.
everything, Eastern, everything. And I lived there, I mean, I just kept reading, and this was very helpful. I was always one of these guys that was seeking for truth, like
Yeah.
what's going on. I remember like being 6 years old, looking around and going, what's going on?
Yeah.
What
I
is,
can
why
totally
do I have
relate.
a hand?
Yeah.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, and part of why I wanted to even do this podcast was a thing I called that I'm want to speak about what I call a creative element, and that sounds like a simple idea. And when it's musicians talking to each other, it's just like, oh, they're talking about being creative, making music, but it's way more than that, And
Yeah,
part of what you're talking about is what I mean. When I
yeah,
was a kid, and people are going through the motions of everyday life and getting up and going to work and stopping at red lights and stuff. I was the same kind of kid who was always wondering, like, why are we doing this? Why are we all
yeah.
doing the same thing? And this is all just an illusion here, right? We're all just kind of agreeing upon some crazy
We're
illusion.
we're agreeing on conditioned, illusory ideas
Yeah.
that then create the world we see.
But from an early age, I was questioning stuff like that too. And when
Yeah,
you're a young kid in grade school or middle school, teachers would just look at me just like, go somewhere else, just, and I
yeah,
just realized my brain wasn't thinking about stuff the way other people were. And so I wanted to have
yeah,
this podcast to talk to people about that. So when I read that
yeah,
about that, it really jumped out to me. I like,
yeah,
wow, Steve is really into some of the same things that I've been thinking about my whole life as well.
yeah. Well, then I can cut right to the chase, basically. Um, just to cap off the Akashic Records thing, it was, Kurt, it was very innocent. I was young and I didn't know anything. And I had a record that I never planned on releasing
Yeah.
because it was too weird. And it was the same thing as the guitar. I can do it, but who cares? Nobody cares but me.
Right.
And then I finished it. I thought, let me put some feelers out. And I sent it to labels. It was rejected. And finally I got this offer, and that was my first introduction to the record business. And I looked at this deal and I said to my attorney, "Are you kidding? That they want to pay me like
Yeah.
$10,000, own the record, and 25 cents a disc, and recoup the 10,000 from my 25? How does this? This is, this doesn't make sense." He goes, "Well, that's a good deal." So I said, "Well, it's not good for me, And I just did a little research, and I discovered that uh, record labels distribute through distributors.
Yeah.
So I started calling distributors, which is weird because distributors don't take records from artists. They
Yeah.
take records from labels, but I
Right.
wasn't a label. But I found a guy who really, he understood what I was doing, Cliff Coltreri, and he allowed me to sell him finished goods at $4.50 a record. And I retain all the rights. And he sold 1,000, then he sold another 1,000. This was like a lot of money
Yeah.
for me. And then another 1,000, then another 1,000. And then certain things started happening in my career, like the Crossroads film and the
Which I want to
Attitude
talk to you about
song.
as well.
Sure, I'd love to. The Attitude song being in the Guitar Player magazine, that was big. So
Yeah.
then there was this demand, and then CDs came along, and I was getting $7.50 a CD
Wow.
at the age of 24, whatever. And I sold like through the years, like 500,000. And this was like a crazy kind of a boom. And really, when I look back, it was something that I picked up from Frank. And what that was if something doesn't feel right, it's usually not right. And also, if you feel any desperation whatsoever, you're shooting yourself in the foot because the results are not going to be what you want. So I always tried to find organic ways of moving forward that made sense.
Intuition as well.
Intuition,
Yeah. I
right.
mean, some people just don't listen to it. I think we were probably getting 70 cents a record on our first record deal,
That's a
and
good deal.
then it was normal at least, but
Yeah,
to make $7 a record was all really
it's
unheard of by
crazy.
an artist.
Yes.
And so that's amazing that you had the wherewithal to just listen to
I
your
don't know.
intuition and try it.
Yeah, it was just very innocent. But the other side of my life was actually more intense. and that was my spiritual studies through the years.
Yeah.
And through those years, like probably like yourself and like many others, you navigate through those things that resonate with you and make sense. And some of it you're supposed to understand, but you really don't. And oh, I get it. Okay, I get it. I'm going to apply this, and I'm going to try that, and I'm going to write this saying down because it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And you're just still there's still it's not there. The peace isn't there. But it wasn't until perhaps 12 to 13 years ago when I discovered Eckhart Tolle
Mm.
that that I was able to get more of a grasp on those things that I was looking for.
Right. Which is
The
amazing.
reality, truth.
Yeah. Which is truth. I talk to my wife about all the time right now. Truth is, it scares the hell out of me. Like, there is no such thing as truth these days in our world. Like, it's more about people's opinion of whatever I think is the truth is going to be the truth, rather than any real thing that's truth. And it freaks me
Well,
out.
there's various ideas of what truth is in the world,
That's for sure.
and in true reality, there is no truth in the world because you are the truth, and who you
Right.
really are is not really in the world. It's not in the world.
Yeah.
And the thing is we can argue, especially on the world stage, what truth is, but it will only ever be opinion,
Yeah.
even when presented as fact.
Right.
Because true truth, real truth, has none of that in it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have anything in it. Real truth doesn't even have time in it.
Yeah, the best, right. The best description I've heard of it or read of it it was described as suchness.
It's the suchness. It's what the Buddha said. It was great.
Right.
The isness of the present moment.
Right.
It's the isness, which has no thought in it,
Right.
and is the only place where you'll ever find peace, true creativity, and abundant joy,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is it's our natural state. That's
Well,
actually our natural state.
yeah, that's what they tell us. I'm not
Yeah.
sure we've been able to find it, but on that note, I will say my really big first introduction to your guitar playing was in 1986 in the Crossroads movie, where after all this suchness, you got to play the Devil's Head Cutter.
Yeah.
And did some incredible, I mean, for me, I think you really did steal the movie there at the end when I was watching you do what you were doing.
The
on that
ham was
instrument.
cooking.
Yeah, it was really incredible, really amazing.
thank
So
you.
what you said that did great things to your career, but what was it like
God.
at the time?
Well, as you know, many things like that happen innocently,
Yeah.
and you have no idea how they're going to turn out. But you put your best foot forward. And when that came along, it was a situation where I had released Flexible, and there was a song on it called the Attitude Song that had all these crazy
Yeah.
guitar proto techniques and stuff, funny noises. And I sent it to Guitar Player magazine, and they put it in a little flexi disc, and put it in the magazine. And Ry Cooder, who I was a big fan of and is also a film composer, was trying to pull this music together for this film that had this guitar duel,
Yeah.
and he called Guitar Player and said, I need a hotshot young guitar player. And they played him the Attitude Song over the phone. So he called me, which was a big surprise. And he came out to see me, and he gave me a copy of the script. And, they were trying to get this to work with various other people. But what would happen, it would inevitably turn into a jam.
Yeah.
And there was no real theater in it. Now, because I'm such a ham and I love theater so much, I was able to look at this script and say, oh shit, I got that. I know what this needs.
Yeah.
It needs this to play like that, and then him to do that, and then me to do that, and then it needs a modulation, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just really kind of a scripting of a audio visual, and it was simple. It was all in the script. Like Jack Butler
Yeah.
breaks out by making his guitar sound like a train. It was written in the script, and Steve Vai says, I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Tune it down low, and you go kunk 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 kunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I followed the script, and it just worked really well. Rye and I worked on the parts, and he does all the slide, and I did all the
Yeah.
parts for me and Eugene, who was Ralph Macchio.
Right.
And it was really fun, and it turned out, it was interesting because at the end, when we first cut it, I didn't lose bad enough.
That's what I thought too.
They actually, a month after the shooting, they called me back, and they called the entire crew and the actors back, and they rebuilt the entire Devil's Church to catch the one scene. Again, I had to re-record something, and the director said, it has to look like you really lost.
Like you flubbed, yeah.
Like I flubbed. That's when I redid it. But the interesting thing to me was that you could have a hit record, but being in a hit film, it changes everything.
That's for sure. That goes everywhere. And those were, big stars at the time, and the kind of money they put behind promotion and stuff. Like I say, that's the first I saw of you, and it stuck with me. That scene, I used to walk around and tell people about it. So I actually showed it to my daughter. They had it up on YouTube. I was like, you got to watch this. And she's like, so I told her I was interviewing you. So incredible.
I saw it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. What?
I saw it for the first time in many years, about a year ago, and it's just so interesting. I'm like, who is that guy? Where did all that pretension come from?
Yeah. Well, like you say, I think you understood the role. You understood exactly what they were looking for, and I know that feeling. It's a great feeling when you're like, I know this. I know exactly what they're looking for. The innocence of what you're talking about. We got a call from Robbie Robertson to sing on his solo record, and I walk into a room with Robbie and Daniel Lanois and all these people, and he's like, I have this song, I want you to sing something, but he had no part in mind. And so I listened to it, and I just immediately had an idea for it, like, oh, I know what we should sing in there. And I was singing in the control room with all of them standing there. And I started singing the chorus, what it was. And Robbie throws his hands up in the background. And I'm like, I just stopped singing because I was like, what? And he's like, I love it. It's perfect.
It's it. Yeah.
It's a great feeling when it works. It's really
well, you were the perfect puzzle piece at that time for the puzzle.
Yeah. And like you say, we didn't know much. We were very young then. We just walked in and did what we did, and it happened to be what they were looking for, and it's a great thing. I want to talk to you about this. You got a new record that's coming out, I believe, in the near future. I believe it's called Inviolate. Is that correct? And I've been listening to some of the tracks off it, which
thank you.
Just I'm blown away by. I would like to talk to you about one in particular, or a couple in particular, but the Candle Power one, of course, is, I watched the video as well, and again, it's kind of, if people really want to understand the virtuosity of what he's doing, go and watch this YouTube video of him playing Candle Power, because describe with
Kurt.
people what you were doing. You were talking about the different bendings that were going on. Can you talk about that?
Well, one of the things I love to do is challenge myself, like most artists do. And for this, we were in lockdown, and I had some time, and I always wanted to record a song that was really sort of outside of my comfort zone. And I knew it would include more of like a Strat style guitar, which is very difficult for me.
Yeah.
And a clean tone, which is not my normal thing. I'm like a woo, and finger picking, which I've spent precious little time on. I'm not a very good finger picker. And also no whammy bar, which is kind of like that, that for me, it's like taking off one of my arms or something.
Yeah.
But I also felt that I knew I could do it. And that's the important ingredient that an artist needs to have in order to achieve anything. It's just an inner knowing that not only not only yeah, I can do that, but I want to do that. But it wasn't enough. I wanted something else because everybody does, that kind of playing a lot more effective than me. And I thought, what can I do? And I love to do this when it comes time to record anything. What can I contribute here that's different from me, and maybe different than anything I've ever seen?
Right.
I know, and the thing that makes it happen is the knowing that there is something, and you just have to ask for it. So that's what I did. I said, I know there's something, and I want it. I don't know what it is, but I want it. And then the idea comes, and it was the idea of bending notes in different directions while pulling off in order to create a sound that doesn't sound like anything you heard. And it was very difficult. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks, and it tears up your fingers.
Yeah.
But what I discovered was, and it's not uncommon to a particular kind of country guitar playing technique, where they bend strings and play. But this was a little different in that it required the bending of multiple strings in different directions.
And not two strings together on the same fret,
No.
like some people might do simply. You're doing different frets, different strings completely, and in different directions is what I saw.
Yeah. and doing that on like a D string or an A string with one finger.
Yeah.
It's really the intonation when you bend a note and you hold it.
Yeah.
Trying to play other notes and bend other notes and release them and whatever. The idea was there, but the execution seemed impossible. But what's funny about things that seem impossible is the moment you start doing them, they don't seem impossible anymore. So I just started playing and playing, and I discovered that the only way that I could execute some of that stuff was by only moving the tip joint.
Right.
So that's why I called it joint shifting.
Yeah.
So like, at times it's like it's a stretching of the joint as opposed to the bending.
Right.
As if you bend with all your fingers, this part of your hand hits other strings.
Right.
So you have to come down on the notes and bend with the joint.
Yeah. And when I first heard the song, I was like, well, now is he playing two different guitar parts where one is playing like harmonics and he's playing over it? And then when I saw the video, I was like, oh my God, it was incredible. Like, I couldn't believe it. I want to talk about the knapsack as well, because there's an interesting story. I also watched the video on that, which just made me disheartened as a guitar player completely, because you're playing it you had a sling on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And your arm in a sling. Yeah. And your other hand had your thumb in a cast. So you're literally using four fingers to do this. And when I listened to the track first before I saw the video, it sounded like, oh, he's just flying around the guitar. It's amazing. But when I saw the video, I was like, oh my God. So can you talk about what was going on there?
Yeah, that was another one of those innocent things where, I tore ligaments in my shoulder. I had 3 torn ligaments and I needed surgery, and the timing was right because it was lockdown.
Yeah.
So last December I went in, and the doctor that did the shoulder surgery, his name was Dr. Knapp, Knapp,
right.
And he's a total head guy, and he developed this sling that was specific for the kind of surgery that I had, and he calls it the knapsack.
Right.
So I had to call the song Knapsack after Dr. Knapp, because I had just come down after the first 2 days of painkillers, and was able to start to think clearly. And this beautiful, incredible black Onyx Pia.
Yeah, that is a beautiful guitar.
At the house from Ibanez.
Really nice.
Yeah. And the moment I saw it, I just started to, go off into realms of fantasy. But I only had one hand, because this was like this, and it looks crazy and it looks impossible. But
it does look impossible.
Yeah, but any guitar player that has a style that has a lot of legato, which is someone like me, it's actually not that hard.
I mean, you're doing just all pull-offs when you're playing that, right?
Yeah, pull-offs and hammers.
Yeah.
So I started slow, and it was great because it was a moment where I had the guitar and there was disappointment because I couldn't play. And then but I thought, well, make a song with one hand. You could do it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It
It
does
was
make,
that easy. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, sometimes in creating anything you're doing, putting some kind of limitation on that can absolutely take you out of your comfort zone and send you into a very creative place. And so it's a
Yeah.
great
It
idea.
just needs to be accompanied with the feeling of, but I know I can do that.
Yeah.
If I put the screws to it, I can do it.
Yeah. I can do something.
Yeah, everybody does that. Everybody does it. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I
You,
think it's
you,
a good practice. I remember
yeah.
our first record, producer T-Bone Burnett, we would come in with a song and we'd have our style of playing it. And every once in a while, he'd be like, let's play everything as a ballad today.
I
So
hear that he
all
used to
these
do things like that.
up
Yeah.
energy songs you used to play were young 20-year-olds with all this energy, and all of a sudden you record everything as a ballad and just flip it around and throw it around and see what inspires and triggers this or that. And
Wow. That's the brilliance of his production.
yeah, it is. He really, that's where I learned that a producer isn't just saying put more reverb on the snare or
Yeah.
turn the guitar up. He's actually working with the musicians and
Yeah.
getting them in the best headspace they can be in to create the best music they can create, you know. And so
Yeah.
it taught me everything about producing, just seeing him work. There's one more song I wanted to talk to you about on the record, because of the guitar that you talked about, was the Hydra.
Mhm. Teeth of the Hydra.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a guitar called the Hydra. Is it the
Yeah.
three-necked
Yeah.
guitar? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. It makes knapsack and candle power. Uh, you know, I don't know
Yeah.
what to say. All I know is I was probably about 5 years ago. I came up with I think I was watching Mad Max, one of those kinds of films where
Yeah.
they're in the desert and the guy's on the truck and he's got
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
guitar
yeah,
and
yeah.
he's
That
remember
is
that?
the second Mad Max, I believe.
That's
Yeah.
the second Mad Max.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And I thought that's cool, but that's not cool enough. I know what you know. I got so you come. I came up with the idea. I want a guitar that's like a steampunk style,
Yeah.
triple neck with all this stuff, you know. And when an idea becomes that compelling, you figure out how to get it done. I'm really fortunate because I work with a company that's willing to build any of my crazy
Yeah.
ideas. So I took these ideas and I just gave them to the design team at Hoshino, and they made a prototype, the guys in Japan, and I couldn't even first they made renditions, you know, illustrations,
Yeah.
and the design was just amazing and fabulous. And I decided to it was actually three necks. Originally, it was a 10 string, which was 5 doubled strings, and then a 7 string, and then a bass neck, and then harp strings. And I decided to change the 10 string neck to a 12 string. And it's interesting because half of the 12 string neck is fretless and it has a sustainer, and the E and the A strings on the bass are fretless. And then it's got the 7 string. And so it took them a while to make it. And then once they made it and it appeared at the house, I just couldn't believe it. It was so beautiful and interesting and playable. But then I thought, oh my God, what are you going to do with this? You know, because it runs the risk of just being a novelty. You know, it's like, oh, there's Steve Vai with a crazy guitar that he came up with because he can have people build it, you know. So it needed to be substantiated.
Yeah.
With the original idea, which was to create a piece of music with it that sounded seamless, that didn't sound like a gimmick, that had melody,
Yeah.
that I could navigate all the strings and make it sound like a piece of like real music, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the mental goal. And when I sat down to do it, it was overwhelming, you know, because you say, what was I thinking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how am I going to do this? How can I can't, you know, and you got a bum shoulder and, you know, and that's all the little voices of insecurity.
Right,
there was
right.
a stronger voice, which was, I believe, the voice of my higher self that everybody has.
Right.
And it said the same thing that it always says to me whenever I'm in a position where I'm becoming overwhelmed with how are you going to do this? It says, shut the fuck up and just do it. You got this and you know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just shut the fuck up and do it. So I said, okay, all right, you win. Just one little note at a time, one little thing at a time. And then it becomes really fun.
Yeah.
You know,
I can't.
so that's how the song came about. So if you listen to that song,
Yeah.
all the bass, all the guitar, the harp strings and the 12 string, that's all one performance on the Hydra.
Oh my God. And because I don't know, I'm asking you, why the fretless parts?
Because I can.
Just, I mean, but it's something you envisioned, you're saying beforehand, like, I need this to be fretless because you had a reason for it. Something
the reason was because I had an opportunity to do something quirky.
Yeah.
And I'm a quirky guy,
Yeah.
you know, my music has a lot of quirk. I think it's a strength. I see it as a strength.
Sure.
So that's like why my guitar has a handle, or it's, you know, the notes go this way instead of that way.
Yeah.
It's just part of my personality that I don't want to make excuses for.
Not at all.
So the 12 string, I thought, well, I could do just a 12 string, but come on, this is an opportunity. What's, you know, so I said, well, that's why I went with 10 string, but that didn't fly.
Yeah.
So I said, make it half fretless. And, you know,
And it
that was the idea.
sparked more innovation for you.
Yeah.
That's cool. And
because I knew once it was there, I had to use it or else I'd be a wanker, you know? So I do. And you can hear one little part where it does the little 12 string.
That's cool. And you've worked with Ibanez for a long time. And
yeah.
And I remember when the first Jums were coming out, I went out and bought one.
Wow.
Early on. Just because when I looked at it in the music store, it was like hot pink and bright green and all these colors, and it had the handle on it, and I just thought it was the most outrageous thing I'd ever seen. I thought I'll never probably be able to play this on stage, you know, but I wanted to buy it just to hang on to it because it was so wild and interesting, you know. And so I did go out and get one of them, but problem being when you're young and you don't have a lot of money, I eventually had to trade it on another guitar, but I wish I would have been able to keep that guitar even to today because it was just so interesting and so innovative. But can you talk about your relationship with them over the years? I know these guitars behind me are guitars I put together myself for just because, like you, I started tearing guitars apart and trying to find something that was more kind of a tone I was looking for. And, and it just required me ripping things apart and putting them back together. And as I understand it, you were kind of doing that before you went to Ibanez. Is that true?
Well, that was another thing that I learned from Frank, because he would tear guitars apart and put things in them that were completely unconventional, like parametric EQs or all sorts of things. So that broke down the barrier of the guitar being the sacred thing that you can't alter. It's like you alter it to your specifications so it's right for you. So I learned that from Frank, and that was valuable because then I, you know, through my career, you know, as a youth, I loved Strats because they had whammy bars.
Yeah.
You know, and but I didn't like the way they sounded. They were kind of thin. They weren't rock. They weren't Led Zeppelin, you know, in my mind.
Yeah.
So I wanted a Les Paul, but they didn't have whammy bars. I couldn't really sit with them well. I couldn't play them well. Something funny is happening to my screen. I don't know if it's happening to you, but
you look good on this end as far as I can see. But
okay, that's fine then. All right. So okay, so I wanted something that was more of an amalgamation of all these things that I felt other guitars didn't have, that I could have, that would take me in a direction that I wanted to go. So for instance, at the time, you may remember back to like in the early 80s, it was very rare to find a 24 fret neck with a whammy bar.
Yeah.
And you could never find humbuckers in a guitar with a whammy bar. I mean, I think Edward was probably the first one to do that I know of. So I thought, well, what do you really want? What do you want? So I thought, well, so I went to this little guitar shop, and at the time I had just joined Dave Roth's band, and I really needed to have an arsenal of instruments, you know.
Yeah.
So I went to this little guitar shop, Performance Guitar, and I got these bodies, and I thought, okay, let me tweak these a little bit to be a little more. Cause I like the Strat look, but they always look pedestrian, you know. They weren't sexy,
Yeah.
and I wanted something more, just more sexy, you know. What a 25-year-old believes is sexy in a guitar, you know.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted two humbuckers and a single coil because I like the sound of the humbuckers more than the single coil in the neck and treble position. But in the middle position, I wanted, you know, like in Strats, when you go in that in between and you
Yeah.
got the middle and the neck,
Yeah.
it's got that beautiful tubey
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I realized what that is two single coil pickups. So I had the 5-position switch made. I didn't. This was actually something that
Yeah.
came
Right.
came as conversation. So when it is in the in-between position, it splits the coil on whichever humbucker is activated. So I get that sound. And I didn't this was all innocent stuff, you know. They would I come to find out later, and this is just what they tell me, you know, there was a first production guitar that had a splitter coil like that
Yeah.
in that position. So then I thought, I don't like where the volume is. I'm going to move it down here. Simple things like input jacks on a Les Paul on a Strat never made sense to me because you step on them and they come out.
Right.
So make it like this, you know, so it goes in the body. Simple things. And then when it came time for so it had the 24 fret necks. I could never really get my hands. I got pretty big hands, and I could never really get them up to these frets. You know, I mean, Strats
Right.
had and Les Pauls had those frets, but you couldn't get to them comfortably.
Not past
And I could
21,
never
that's for sure.
Yeah, I could never understand why they give you the frets, but they don't allow you to get to them. You know,
Yeah.
so I made this cutout so it perfectly fits my hand
Right.
to get to 24 frets. You know, I get up there, and then there was the whammy bar, and the whammy bar was a special case for me because I knew that I was really in love with it, and it was part of my expression. It's like my concerts are like whammy bar clinics or something, you know. So I thought, I want to pull up on this thing. I want to be able to make the notes go really high because
Yeah.
back then, you know, whammy bars, you were lucky if you got a whole step.
Yeah, the block will hit the wood and you just can't go any further.
That's it. So
Right.
I looked at it and I said, what's stopping it? And it was the block hitting the wood.
Right.
So I took a hammer and a screwdriver and I banged out the wood. And next thing you know, I had this floating tremolo, and it was like, you know, wow, I was going up like a fifth,
Yeah.
and it was like heaven in a cup,
Yeah.
you know, and that they tell me that was the first kind of floating trem with that much play in it.
Yeah.
But you see, all these things were just innocent. They were just like, what do you want? What do you really just what is it you just want?
Yeah.
Forget about what everybody's doing, and what do you want? And it was so easy and innocent. And then I had these guitars, and then I joined Roth's band, and everybody was, all the guitar companies were interested in
Yeah.
having you play their guitars, as you know.
Sure.
So it always felt weird to me to endorse a guitar. And so I'd say, thank you, I have my guitar, I got it right here. I had it built, it's perfect. And then they said, well, we'll build that for you. I thought, well, that might be novel, that'd be good.
Yeah.
So I sent it out to all these companies, some of the big companies, and what I got back was basically their guitar with my name on it, you know, and I thought, that's not what I want,
Right.
except for Ibanez. In 3 weeks, they brought me a guitar that was just outstanding, and it was the guitar that I designed. And at the last moment, and then they said, do you want to, you know, we'll make this for you, and we'll you know, give you guitars. And I said, that's great, let's do it. And we'd like to sell this guitar. And I thought, who's going to want it? It's so
Yeah.
peculiar to me, you know, it's got these quirky things. And they said, well, you'd be surprised, Mr.
Yeah.
Steve, you know.
Right.
So I thought, all right, okay. Holy shit, Kurt.
Yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. I had no
Sure.
idea. That was I stumbled into. I mean, it's so successful.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky, and the thing is, the company is so good. I've been so lucky that
That's what I
they've
wanted to
been.
ask. Like, as far as like the wood they're using and stuff for the bodies and stuff, is it why do so many of the guitar like Joe Satriani and these people go with Ibanez as a company? Is there something about the guitar besides 24 frets and the floating trim that is makes these guitars work so well for the virtuoso type players?
Well, I think that answer would be different for a lot of people. They
Yeah.
obviously yeah, they do make really high quality instruments. Their quality control is annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we can't sell that guitar, Steve. It's got a blemish. I'm like, where?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that no. And they always, like this onyx black Pia, they had to not sell half of them that were made because there was some of the things that it contained, like the inlay, were so delicate that it was starting to crack a little. So they
Right.
just wouldn't, So they're very concerned with quality control. They really have their ear to the grindstone, so to speak, because they listen to the artist, and that was the allure for me. Because I got to tell you, frankly, Kurt, I'm not really one of those guys that's fascinated with all the nuances,
Right.
like the kinds of woods or the
Yeah.
the neck dimensions and things like that. For me, it's always been the personality of the instrument and how it resonates with the soul
Right.
of the player. So what started to happen was, uh, oh, I'm sorry. Let me answer the question. So the attraction for me, it was nice that they make quality instruments, but they are unendingly interested in my ideas. And this is like that with many of their artists. They want to build the instrument that's right for you.
Yeah.
I don't believe that any other company that I could have worked for would have been able to build the Hydra,
Yeah.
because like the Hydra is it's a work of love and passion. No doubt, because
Yeah.
there's when you see it and every little thing, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's because
So
they
much
got
different
passion.
there's so many different things that would go into building a guitar like that, simply because all the strings are vibrating, right? And they're all vibrating at
Yeah.
different frequencies and stuff, and I imagine a builder, an engineer, who has to somewhere sit and think about stuff like this, like, well, what's going to happen to this instrument when it's all
Well,
vibrating?
unfortunately, they left that problem to me.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the Hydra, the Teeth of the Hydra, the song,
Right.
you can hear when I did
Yeah.
certain things are just, you know, freewheeling.
It's rocking.
But I created it in a way that all that freewheeling stuff works.
And the one behind you is called Pia. Where did that name come
Oh,
from?
this is the Pia.
Because I think there's someone else. Did you was your wife's name Pia?
My wife is Pia.
Does she have anything to do with it?
Well, wives
Just
have to do with a lot of things that
yeah.
you don't realize. But yeah, she does. It's in the sense that this is a gem basically,
Yeah.
and I changed some of the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And this design was something that was special to her and me,
Yeah.
because it's a yin and yang.
Right.
It shows a flow, and
Yeah.
also it's petal leaves, and also it has to do with bees in an odd kind of a way. And I like to show her stuff because
Yeah.
she's really honest, and
Yeah.
brutal sometimes.
Which is it's nice to have though. It's nice
Yeah.
to have someone who tells you the
Yeah.
truth even when it's hard to hear.
When it's hard to, but she has no problem, and it's very healthy for me to hear it. So, and she's really on. She's just an inspired person. She'll look at it and go, "Map, da 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 la la la," and
Yeah.
I'll be like, no, and you're right.
How long have you been
Right.
beekeeping as well?
Well, beekeeping. Oh, I think I started that. Okay, we bought this property 26 years ago, so I've probably been doing it for about 25 years.
That's incredible and very good for the earth. I commend
Yeah, it's
you.
fun hobby too.
It's very good for you. Okay, well, I don't want to take up your whole day, but I did want to thank you. Inviolate is coming out soon. You're also going on a tour in 2022. Is that right?
Yep.
And you're
Yeah,
going
we
to start
kick.
knocking on doors again?
Yeah, we kick off in North America. I think January 28th at the House of Blues in Vegas.
Wow.
And it's a long tour. I got about 250 shows around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
very excited about it.
I wish you the best of luck and with all that, and stay healthy on your travels, because I, for
Thank you,
one,
Kurt.
know how fatiguing it can be to be out there for a long time like that. So I hope everything
Yeah.
goes wonderfully for you.
Thank
The
you. How are
shows
you? And how are you doing? What are you up to?
I started doing this podcast so I could talk to
Yeah.
really interesting people, but I've been out doing shows sparingly, here and there, some
Yeah.
of this year, and I'll probably be releasing a record next year again, and going out and doing shows, the same
Great.
kind of routine of what we do. And but this podcast has been interesting for me because my daughter suggested I do it, and I hadn't thought about doing a podcast, but I thought, there's this thing I've always wanted to like teach in a school, like I told you, the creative element, because I just think in my growing up and all my years in school and stuff, there just wasn't a lot of emphasis on creativity.
Yeah.
There was so much on here's the rules, here's
Yeah.
grammar, here's the mathematical
Academics.
theorems, and you learn it and you shut up. And even when I put my kids in school for the first time, they were talking about put a bubble in your mouth, keep your mouth shut, walk on the blue line. And I was just like, I just don't agree
Yeah.
with that, and I think I believe creativity is kind of at the core of everything we do in our lives all
It's
the
our
time,
main
even putting a
function. Yeah.
shopping list together or making your schedule, how you're going to get through a day. It can all be parts of creativity, and I
Absolutely.
think we should put more emphasis on it. So this
I
podcast has given me a
agree.
chance to talk to people about it and kind of push that a little more.
Well, God bless you. It's great.
Thank you so much.
It seems as though, not that I'm a big studier of the world stage, but it seems as though there is some movement in the curriculum, because as far as you were saying, it seems as though the entire educational curriculum of children is upside down.
Yeah, I
So
just think
hopefully it's changing.
that we have to understand that not all people learn the same. Like for me, I need world experience to really learn about something, to really have what I would consider knowledge and experience from something. I have to experience it. Reading in a book about it helps my imagination a little bit, but it doesn't really put that experience in my mind. It's just pure, and it because you were
Yeah.
there and you did it.
And you
And
did it.
that is how some brains learn. And so I'm pushing that. So I'm having fun with this, talking to people. I really appreciate you coming on the show and
God,
talking to
you're
us about
doing
it.
it. You're doing it. You're teaching and you're inspiring. So God bless you, brother.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
And
So
thank
you have a
you.
great day, and we'll hopefully
All right,
meet
you
up
too,
somewhere
Kurt.
on the road.
All right. Best of luck,
Take
brother.
care. Everybody, it's Kurt Newman, Staring at the World. I wanted to tell y'all to subscribe to the podcast and rate, review, engage with it. Get it wherever you download your podcast, but please listen, and thank you very much for listening. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks for listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a podcast about creative innovation. Please be sure to download, subscribe, rate, and review, and keep listening wherever you get your podcasts.